He's clearly phoned this news station. He said in the last few minutes, we will overcome this. He said those who attempt a coup will pay a heavy price in the courts. He's also said he believes the attempted uprising will be resolved within a short time. A quick word from Tim Marshall on that.
Briefly, Anna, two things I noticed immediately from that. One, he is in a hotel or an office with the curtains drawn. He clearly can't get to a proper broadcasting station, therefore he is to an extent trapped. Second, that was shown via an Arabic television, but NTV, the private television, it was not shown by TRT, the state television.
And the interesting thing about TRT, I think we've actually got some other pictures from TRT, the state broadcaster, because we get brought reports some time ago now that the state broadcaster had been stormed by these military taking over and forcing newscasters to make a statement. I think we do have some pictures of that, of the newscaster at TRT reading that statement from the military in which they said, they claimed that they'd taken over the country and that they were now in charge. So those are the pictures of the newscaster being told to read that statement, and again it's an Arabic translation that you can hear over the top. I'm getting more lines from that extraordinary interview via his phone to the news channel. He's saying in that interview that he's returning to the capital, Ankara. He's saying he doesn't believe the coup plotters will be successful. So this interview clearly ongoing. He's urged people to take to the streets as well. Now, how significant is that? Nabila, to you there, urging people to go onto the streets, how potentially explosive could that be?
Well, that's first and foremost a clear sign of desperation. I think we are talking about a president who's pretty much holed up at the moment and who's using any possible way of communicating with his supporters, and what he's perhaps attempting to achieve is to garner his supporters and try to essentially reverse the course of action.
Last throw of the dice, I'd say. That does not look to me like a man in control of his country. That looks to me like a man hiding in a hotel room on FaceTime or whatever. And a last throw of the dice is to get the people out, because if he's lost the military, and look at this, the idea that this is a handful of renegade army people is a nonsense. This is nationwide.
Okay. I'm just going to take you live now to the centre of Istanbul. We can take you live to Taksim Square, bang in the centre of Istanbul. This is a journalist. I know your name is Dorian. Dorian Jones, I spoke to you earlier. Tell us a little bit about what you can see around you, Dorian. Oh, we've just lost it. Obviously, we will try to re-establish that link. President Erdogan's link was clearly a little bit better than our one there. We'll try and re-establish it.
It's worth saying, I don't know why that link went down. Skype does go down, but Twitter, Facebook and others are all being taken down, which again shows you that the military is in charge of the communication system. And also, to put it into context, in 1980, after the coup, which lasted 2 or 3 years of military rule, hundreds of thousands of people disappeared. I do not believe Turkey has changed that much. The backlash, if Erdogan wins, will be terrible. If the army wins, it's also going to be rough.
OK, let's bring in Dorian Jones. We've re-established that link there to Dorian Jones, who's a reporter. He's in the centre of Istanbul in Taksim Square. Describe the scene around you, Dorian.
Well, I'm in the heart of Istanbul. Where I'm standing, there are about 24 soldiers with carrying assault rifles. They have secured the center of the square. Behind them, there is about an equal number of police who are just watching the police. Now, the Prime Minister earlier the evening has called on the police to defend his government. At the moment, there seems to be some kind of standoff between the soldiers and the police. There's a group of about 30, 40 people milling around in front of the soldiers. The soldiers are just looking on, very calm at the moment. Now, normally the center of the city at this time of the night would be packed with revelers. It's the main entertainment part of the city. It is now relatively empty. Everywhere is closed. It's very eerily quiet. No sound of music or anything. The military have told everyone to go home. They are declaring reportedly a curfew on state TV. And for the now at the moment, it's very eerie calm, but there is a sense of maybe some foreboding. One of the most prominent figures of the ruling party, The mayor of Ankara, Ali Gökçe, has called on all his supporters to defy the curfew and to go on the streets. At the moment, at least here, it doesn't appear that call has been heeded at the moment.
I don't know if you're able to turn your phone around at all to show us the scene around you, because we've got a reasonably good picture given that you're in the centre of all of this, and it'll give us more of a sense of the scene there as you describe it in Taksim Square. It's interesting that you mentioned the state broadcaster there, because we're just hearing in the last few minutes that the state broadcaster TRT has gone off air in the last few minutes. So Dorian, you say that it's very quiet there, there's no music as you would normally hear on a Friday night, but how many people have come onto the streets, and have they come onto the streets to find out what's going on, or are they expressing any kind of sympathy with one side or the other, or why are those people there?
Well, at the moment, it's difficult to say. Some people are here just to see what's happening. There are some that are chanting chants in support of the government, whereas others are, and I've just been told by the military now to stop broadcasting. They seem to be getting a little bit... yeah, they're getting a bit heated, some of them. But at the moment, yeah, the crowd is pretty calm. But there is this definite tension, especially the question everyone will be wondering is, will the police heed the call to defend the government? There have been reports of clashes between the police and the army in parts of Istanbul. Here, at least at the moment, it's a very tense standoff.
Well, Dorian Jones, we're going to let you go and make sure that you keep safe. Thanks very much indeed for giving us that insight into what's happening right in the heart of Istanbul. We appreciate your time. Thank you. So a few more newswires just to bring you. As I say, the state broadcaster TRT going off air there. Nabila Ramdani, what do you make of the reaction of people on the streets? It must be a very confusing situation for people there in Turkey.
Yes, indeed, but they are effectively responding to calls from President Erdogan, as we have seen on your channel, but also calls from the mayor of Ankara, who is calling for people and supporters of the president to take to the streets en masse. They're actually calling themselves the soldiers of the president, and this is in effect an attempt to reverse a course of action, an action that is developing extremely fast at the moment.
Well, yes, and we're now getting word from the Foreign Ministry here in the UK saying we're concerned by events unfolding in Ankara and Istanbul. They have said until the situation in Turkey becomes clearer, they're advising UK citizens to avoid public places and to remain vigilant. We have already heard from several other countries with similar advice for their citizens there this evening. So, Nabila Ramdani, clearly the next few hours are absolutely crucial. We've seen President Erdogan there appealing to people to go onto the streets. He's saying that the government is still in control. But I suppose the big question now is whether or not the police and his presidential guard will be able to protect the government and make sure that this group of military aren't successful. That's what he will hope.
Well, yes, indeed, and there are already reports which are coming thick and fast, as it were, reports about martial law being implemented, a curfew being in place. A military statement was read on Turkish TV as well, which suggests, once the opposition, if you like, or the military takes over state television, then they have access to the propaganda tool, effectively, in order to diffuse their own messages. The ruling AK party headquarters are said to be surrounded as well. The armed forces look as if they are pretty much in control, and they are citing very forcefully the autocratic rule of Erdogan and the increased terrorism in the country. But I think, as Tim was saying quite rightly earlier, as we witnessed with the coup in 1980, the idea behind it was to bring about stability and order and a period where calm would be restored in order to move on. But it has to be said that the reality is military coups invariably undermine democracy and never produce democratic societies. So it could be another dangerous development, as it were.
Well, yes, and Tim, what would you say to that? It
is so fluid at the moment. I agree with Nabila. I am concerned for the next few hours because you can see people on the streets. At times like this, there can be incidents. If the intelligence service is going to stay loyal, if certain police militia are going to stay loyal, what happens if people start to attack the soldiers? It's incredibly volatile at times like this. I've just seen a line actually on Twitter which really caught my attention. When we were watching Erdogan on FaceTime, in a little phone on television, looking hardly presidential, apparently he said this is a coup attempt by the Gulen movement. Now the Gulen movement is not the army. The Gulen movement is the Islamists, which he's an enemy of, and he's taken over their newspapers. To try and put it onto them, I think is pretty ridiculous. This is clearly the secular military takeover, and Erdogan is clearly flailing around, desperate to try and turn this round, and at the moment he's not. And some of the pictures we're seeing on NTV, and I stress NTV, not the state broadcaster, we are seeing people waving at the military, giving victory signs to the military, celebrating the military being on the streets. This is going to be a country absolutely splintered, and it's an extremely volatile country. One of your previous guests said this was a 20th century coup. It really does, it is so reminiscent of coups we saw in the previous century.
We're just getting word that British Lufthansa flights to Turkey are diverting or returning to their origin because of what's going on there in Turkey. That's the latest line. We have, of course, heard that the military have said that they have taken over Ataturk airport as well. And so in the last few minutes, we've heard the Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan in those extraordinary pictures where he was speaking to the newscaster there via a mobile phone. You can see him either on Skype or on FaceTime. There he is. He has urged people to take to the streets to protest against what he described as a coup attempt there in Turkey. He said it was by a minority faction within the military, and he has vowed that it would meet with a necessary response. And he said that the people must gather in public squares to show their response to this attempted military takeover. And these comments were live on television. We're just getting another line in from an EU foreign policy chief saying on Twitter that they're in contact with the EU delegation in Ankara. There are calls for restraint and respect for democratic institutions. Nabila Ramdani, how would you expect the different countries to respond to what's going on now? We're obviously getting some advice from countries to their citizens on how they might behave. To stay indoors is largely the advice, but how else might you see the international community deliver their verdict on what's going on? What would their response be?
Well, it has to be said that it's an extremely difficult situation for foreign governments to, beyond condemning what's going on or expressing extreme concern, there is very little they can do. And of course, it's very difficult for anybody or any foreign head of state to condone a military coup, because that's exactly what is happening, or endorse Erdogan. They have expressed criticism towards him in the past as well, especially in relation to his appalling record as far as human rights are concerned. They will certainly be extremely concerned as to what position to take, and effectively they pretty much have no interlocutor left.
Well, yes, and what do you make of international response, Tim? How important is it?
They are, well, I don't think it is. At times like this, it's not very important. At times like this, they're not taking any notice of what's coming out of the White House and what's coming out of the Foreign Office. They are in the middle of a bitter family squabble, which could easily end in a fairly large death toll if they don't, if this goes wrong either way. So I don't think they're going to take any notice. Now, tomorrow, when things are clearer, they will. For example, the Turkish military is pretty close to the Americans. There will be all sorts of phone lines ringing. But, he is not taking any notice of what's happening on the outside.
This is another interview. This is to NTV. I understand this is live at the moment. He's speaking Turkish. He's doing an interview now with another television station to NTV. Let's just have a little listen in. Clearly he is speaking Turkish, but let's listen in.
Ben de meydanda olacağım. Başbakanımız da meydanlarda olacak. Ve şu anda bazı yerlere işgal kuvvetleri sızmış. Örneğin Atatürk Havalimanı'nda geçen günü malum DAEŞ'çiler vardı. Şimdi de benzerleri kuleyi işgal etmişler. Ve bu kuleyi işgal etmek suretiyle uçuşlara müsaade etmiyorlar. Gelenleri de orada bekletiyorlar şu anda. Böyle bir durum söz konusu. Bütün bunlara karşı gereği yapılacaktır. Yargı şu anda zaten gerekli adımları atmış vaziyettedir. Emniyet teşkilatımızın içerisinde...
So Marshall, can we read anything into his body language there? I mean, he appears on the face of it to look relatively relaxed. I mean, can we read anything into that?
Forgive me, I can't. The whole thing is a bit bewildering because there's all sorts of rumours going around that he's already thinking of the escape route. I mean, as I said, when he called for people to come on the streets, that is a call for violence, because you can't come onto the streets and persuade the army to go away without violence. He has a call for violence. You can argue that he has the democratic right on his side and that he is the elected leader of that country and his party is the biggest party. But I just can't see a man hiding in a hotel room turning this round at the moment. There are all sorts of rumours going around that he's already thinking about where to go for asylum, because if he loses this, Turkey is not the sort of place where they'll just say, well, thanks for everything you did for the country, now run along to Izmir and lie on the beach for the next 20 years. He's in a spot of trouble.
Well, yes, and we're getting a word from US government sources now via the Reuters news agency saying the United States believes a coup attempt is underway in Turkey. At this point, unclear who is winning. And another line as well regarding America. The US Federal Aviation Administration has said that any US-bound flights from Istanbul that were in the air before the airport closed will be allowed to land in the US.
Well, NBC have gone further. NBC are saying that he did try to get back to Istanbul, but he couldn't make it, and that he is now, and the phone connection has just gone down, and that he is he's looking at his options. Does he try to get to the capital, or does he try to get out of the country?
AFP news agency, there's just one report on this at the moment, but they are reporting that there's been a strong explosion heard in the Turkish capital, Ankara. That's just a one line of a report. We can't confirm it, of course, but at the moment the AFP news agency is suggesting there's been an explosion heard in the Turkish capital, Ankara. So we'll watch to see if there's more on that at the moment. And Nabila Ramdani, it is incredibly hard to get a clear picture of what's going on, isn't it? Clearly you've got the military on the one side reading out their statement. You've got Erdogan on the other saying he's still in control. It's very hard to get an unbiased point of view of the situation there on the ground.
Well, yes, indeed, but one can clearly point at the irony of the situation. 2 days ago, Erdogan signed a bill effectively giving wide-ranging legal immunity to the military, and today they are turning against him. And lots of people are also pointing at all the contradictions that encapsulated Erdogan's presidency. I'm using the past tense already because it's looking like he's on the way out effectively, but he's clearly taking to Twitter and social media to assert, the fact that he is on top of the situation, that he's still in charge of the country. And this is, of course, social media that have been infamously blocked and banned under his presidency. And this is one of the, perhaps, one of the grievances that have been held against him so passionately. His autocratic rule, his ruthlessness. Turkey is the country where you have the highest number of journalists, for example, behind bars, and now he's using communication to make a case for staying in power, hanging on.
And yet very popular with some sections of the population, though, as well. Let's just show you the first interview that President Erdogan did this evening, these extraordinary shots of him carrying out an interview with a television station. He did two this evening. This is a clip from the first one with the local television station CNN Turk. We've got a translation for you, so let's just listen to what he said earlier.
I invite the public to go to the airports, go to the squares, go to the streets. Let's gather together. They can come with their tanks and cannons and try to show what they can do. There's nothing more powerful than the people. I haven't seen anything more powerful. We can show the tanks who is powerful.
So that was a little bit earlier. He then went on to do an interview with NTV. Now, this is the shots that they're showing at the moment. Now, we don't know if these are live shots or not, but these are the pictures that NTV is showing at the moment. We did see an interview that they were carrying with him by phone earlier on, but let's just stay on these shots for a moment longer. Difficult to establish, as I say, whether or not it's live or not. Just one quick word about the AFP line that I told you about earlier, that a loud explosion had been heard in the capital, Ankara. The Associated Press news agency is now also reporting that loud explosion. They are quoting local television station CNN Turk as saying that the explosion occurred at the state-run television building. And I think there's another line on it now. Yeah, witnesses also talking in Reuters, also confirming that an explosion has been heard there in Ankara. So it's impossible to know, isn't it, Tim?
You've got to suspect if there's an explosion at a television station. You know, this is not what is almost routine now terror attack by either a Kurdish element or ISIS. This could easily be a fight for that television building. It's so key to control broadcasting, because if you don't, the other side is getting all the messages out and saying we've won, we're in charge. That's why it's so important that he is now not appearing looking rather foolish on an iPhone. He's now looking much more presidential. You know, these are the crucial hours where it can swing either way. At the moment, again, unless the government has been able to get the ball rolling, ring enough people up and say, get out there, people with guns, I mean, and the counter is coming. And if he hasn't done that, I think it is over. If he has done that, and the first little inkling of it is this explosion at the television station.
Who could he call on? I mean, clearly we don't know how big the element within the military is that's trying to carry out this coup.
Well, for me, it's clear it's nationwide because it's in several cities. It's not just a handful. We've seen both the bridges closed, airports have been taken, television stations taken. They're in the main square at Taksim Square in Istanbul, the second city, well, the biggest city in the country, but not the capital. There's clearly a lot of very well organised military people involved in this coup. Against that, and we haven't seen anybody yet against it. And also, it was interesting that the Air Force were flying low, and that was probably in support of the coup. I remember we saw that in Egypt during the coup a few years ago. A show of power. Against that, there will either be the police, but they really don't want to get involved against the military. You will have the Presidential Guard, you'll have intelligence units, and you will have certain private militias. I keep saying it at the moment, they've got to be on the losing side at the moment. I just don't see how they're rolling it back at the moment.
Those reports of an explosion, some reports suggesting it may be at the broadcaster there. Another report now, again, these are witnesses that are being quoted. There's no confirmation, as we should say, with all of these reports. This is witnesses quoted by Reuters saying that military helicopter has opened fire over the Turkish capital, Ankara. So again, that's witnesses talking about that fire from a military helicopter in Ankara. Again, we wait to see if there are more details given of that. A little bit more on the flights. We hear confirmation that a British Airways flight to Istanbul has been diverted to Sofia due to what's going on there on the ground. A Lufthansa flight to Istanbul is returning to its origin in Frankfurt as well, according to company spokeswomen there. And obviously that's in response to the situation in the country, not least because we did see tanks outside Ataturk Airport, and the section of the military that claims that it is taken over in a coup does indeed say that it had control of the airport. This is the scene now, actually, at the airport, I'm told. They're the latest pictures, so I'm not sure quite how recently they were shot, but clearly a lot of people there at the airport. You can see somebody in military uniform just behind there. So we did actually see the tanks parked outside the airport a little bit earlier on.
This is crucial, Anna. I can't tell from these pictures whether people are supporting them or are against them, whether they're saying, thank God you've come onto the streets.
Oh dear. The TV has been relocated by someone livid about lousy exchange rates. Shame. Because wherever you're going in the world, FairFX have the right currency card for you. Get outstanding local exchange rates and even top them up from your sun lounger. You know where you are with FairFX. So search for us or download the app now.
Don't forget to feed Joe.